Is this the right time for you to start your business in Saudi Arabia? Or is it the right time for you to move to Saudi Arabia for the right kind of job prospects? I have the answer for that. But before I give you the answer, I want to actually take a step back and look at that country from a slightly historical perspective. You see, Saudi's been on the map for over almost about 100 years. When oil was discovered there in the mid-1930s, a guy named Max Steinecke, who used to work at the Standard Oil company that was owned by John Paul Getty, was actually the main geologist who discovered oil, and thereafter Standard Oil took a 30% stake in Aramco and developed Aramco into one of the biggest oil producers in the world. So there are over 100 oil fields actively producing oil, and right now there are actively 12 to 13 billion gallons of oil being produced today, and Saudi Arabia is the second largest producer of oil and the largest crude oil exporter in the world. And Saudi Aramco owns 90 to 95% of all oil production that takes place in Saudi Arabia. The economy is a $1 trillion economy. The population is north of about 33 million people, of which there are 20 million local Saudis. The remaining are expats, primarily from South Asia. India, Pakistan, Bangladesh make up the majority, with Egypt coming in right after that. The internet penetration in that country is extremely high, with social media accounts of TikTok, Facebook, Instagram above 25 million people. Facebook, on the other hand, is actually only 12 million subscribers, surprisingly. Now, a kind of economy that has this kind of cash flow, and so this population, this country is ripe for transformation, and that is what Vision 2030 hopes to achieve. Now, there are 8 parts to this vision, and I'll break through each one of them. The first one is the most important one. It is economic diversification. You see, the country wants to move away from its dependence on oil, because the world is moving towards renewable sources of energy, and so Saudi Arabia is now focused on developing tourism as one of the industries that will help bring in economic prosperity. And one of the unique things that they did is that PIF, which is the Public Investment Fund, actually even had a chef travel around all of Saudi Arabia, figuring out what the local culinary delights were so that they could create a truly Saudi menu and a Saudi food, as an example of how they're going to develop tourism. Then the second thing is public sector reforms. What they're trying to do is restructure their government entities to make it much more efficient and much more digitally connected. Now, I can tell you, as someone who recently got a permanent working residency in Saudi, I was amazed at the fact that everything is digital. The driver's license, your Iqama, the ability to take appointments for a driving license, for any sort of public need, whether it's a death certificate, a birth certificate, you can do everything using your phone in Saudi, which is a huge departure from where this country was just less than a decade ago. The third one is cultural and social change, and I have to tell you, my mind was blown. Cultural and social change is taking place at such a rapid pace that it is amazing to see that a society that used to be closed off, that used to be segregated, is now completely open. There are open-air concerts happening. Middle Beast is a huge music festival that took place in Riyadh a few weeks ago. It had 600,000 visitors, men and women of all ages, listening to DJs like Steve Aoki play sets there. Yes, in Saudi. The fourth one is infrastructure and mega projects. Now, I think this is where the headlines really are focused. Projects like NEOM, the Red Sea project, Diriyah, the restoration of the old Riyadh area, the Muraqba, which is going to be outside Riyadh. It's this giant cube that's being built. These are headline projects that are taking the world by storm. It is inviting all types of top developers, architects, engineers. All of the top talent from the world wants to be a part of this, and that's bringing in a lot of great talent into this country that will eventually train the local talent and upscale that local talent. And this is the one that we need to keep an eye out on. The fifth is education and workforce development. And this is important because there has been a great focus on bringing up and upscaling the younger population and introducing them to the workforce. In fact, there is a requirement now that certain companies have to have a certain rate of Saudis on their payroll. The sixth is creating a renewable energy mix, which means that not all of the energy that they use must come from natural resources, but there needs to be renewable energy being used. Even though natural resources are super cheap in this country, they are going to invest, and they are investing, on sources like wind, solar, hydel, and so on, to be able to improve the energy mix of the country. The one point that really stood out for me was the seventh point, which is the strengthening of the national identity. They're making these key areas like Al Ula that are going to be tourism hotspots, where they are talking about and promoting the history of what that culture and that civilization has. And they're going to boost national pride through these projects. There's a big focus on Foundation Day, on Saudi National Day, and to highlight the culture of that region by focusing on these days. And finally, there's a huge focus on innovation and technology. And in fact, if you notice, Saudi has been investing in hundreds of companies through their public investment fund. In fact, they have a sub-company called Co-Builder that actually supports a lot of these companies that are being invested in. They've made investments in companies like Lucid, the electric car company. They've made investments in companies that promote sports media, Live Golf, for example, as a brand, and hundreds of other companies that are making strides because their focus is innovation and technology. So सवाल ये उठता है कि इन सारी चीज़ों को highlight करने के बाद, is Saudi the place to invest in? They've got all the right things. They're saying all the right things. अब मैं पिछले 2 साल से Saudi जा रहा हूँ, and I have to tell you this: that country is serious, at least at the top level. The top level management of every company, the top level of every government organization is all aligned with this national vision. But here's the challenge. अब बहुत सारे लोग पूछते हैं कि सऊदी जो है बिल्कुल दुबई की तरह होने वाला है. Actually, that's not true. There's a big difference that you need to keep in mind. दुबई जो था एक छोटा सा एमिरेट था. It was one of 7 emirates, और दुबई के पास oil and gas resources नहीं थे. दुबई की आबादी उस वक्त 5 लाख अमराटीज से कम थी, और उसके एक्सपैट्स तो उससे भी कम थे. But what happened is कि दुबई ने जब अपने दरवाजे खोले, all of these expats from South Asia primarily came and helped build Dubai. और आज भी अगर आप उनकी local population देखें, the expat population is almost 5 times the local population. तो इसका मतलब ये है कि जो culture आप drive करना चाहते हैं, you can select expats that meet your criteria to bring in that culture. But the challenge is Saudi only has 10 million expats, and it has 20 million Saudis. The mindset, the local mindset that has been there for generations, is going to be much harder to change. So the question is, can Saudi change? Of course it can change. But will it change as fast as Dubai? I don't know. I don't think you can throw too much money on a problem and expect that problem to go away just because you threw money at it. The people need to buy into that. And as long as there is a generation of Saudis that have seen the difficult periods of their history, from the 50s on to the more conservative 80s, they will be resistant to change. And as long as they're sitting in control positions in their companies or in governments, it will be harder for the younger population to drive that change. The minute the younger population, whether it is the millennials or the Gen Z, start taking positions of power, will Saudi's change accelerate. And you will need to rely on expats. I'll give you a personal experience of mine. When I went to get my Iqama, which is basically the Ministry of Investment that gives you your license to reside and work there, you would think a lot of the people there are expats. बाहर से आए सारे अरबी तो नहीं बोलेंगे. कि at least एक बंदा उस ऑफिस में हो जो अंग्रेजी या दूसरी ज़बान बोलता हो. I did not find one person who spoke another language other than Saudi. So how welcomed as an expat am I feeling in my first interaction with that country? Not very welcome. When I went to get a driving license, my experience was far worse than that experience that I find in countries like Pakistan, because it is still disorganized. So they still have a long way to go. But am I betting on them? 100%. The bet needs to be a 10-year bet. It is not something that will turn around in the next 2 years. But in that bet, the level of commitment I have seen on the ground, the focus around Vision 2030, and the fact that they're driving change by bringing international events. For example, they've had the Red Sea Film Festival. They've had the Dakar Rally take place in these days right now. It's the 6th year of the Dakar Rally, which used to be from Paris to Dakar, is now in Saudi Arabia. They also have the FIFA World Cup coming up in 2034, the Asian Winter Games in 2029. they are going to take the world's media headlines by storm. If you look at what they were planning to do with NEOM, the line that was going to be this huge long building, obviously it's been cut down due to budget overruns, is still an ambitious project. I think Saudi Arabia is a place to bet, but you need to be absolutely patient because that is a large population you're dealing with a very set mindset. And unless you have the level of patience you need to work with that type of personality and population that is transitioning at this point in time, you're not going to find success. So look, there are challenges, right? I mean, there are challenges for anyone जो transition period से गुजर रहा है, लेकिन इसका ये मतलब नहीं है कि वो challenges overcome नहीं कर सकेंगे. Yes, some challenges you cannot throw money at a problem and solve. They need to be solved by changing the mindset of people, right? That's my belief. But what I see is the mindset changing. One of the most important things to keep in mind is that when I go and visit Saudi, everyone is talking about progress, everyone is talking about further movement, upward mobility, business expansion, and an overall positive economic and social outlook. And I don't get that experience when I'm talking to people in Pakistan at all. That for me is huge, because if the conversations are starting now and we're seeing the influx of capital to back up those conversations, I bet that in the next 5 years we will see significant transformation. As it is, we're seeing a huge bump up in the hospitality sector. Restaurants are everywhere, coffee shops are everywhere, people are going out to eat, people are spending money, the malls have opened up, every brand is present in that country. Yes, it will transition, and yes, my money lies on Saudi. This is a place I would bet on, because I think that only when you commit to something as such a large scale, you commit money to that, and you commit to changing the minds of people and showing them what that development and what that prosperity looks like, you will get that result. And this is the place I would bet on over Dubai in the next 10 years.